can't actually see what I'm doing here, can you? I'm just gonna. There's a cat. I'm not just fiddling with myself. I promise. Gods. Woohoo! So Samuel Vimes. Sam Vimes is quite often seen as sort of Pratchett's most popular character. I think Sam Vimes had a bit too many books written about him in some ways. It does feel like towards the end it just became his generic, let's go get another type of criminal of another species for Sam Vimes to faff about with and then ask them to join the watch. But this one is just so fresh. Basically, Sam Vimes is a copper. He is currently Captain Vimes of the Night Watch. Remember, there's a Night Watch and the Day Watch. Later on, there is just the Watch. It becomes more of one organisation. But at this point, they're just the Night Watch. They only work during the night, which sometimes they do daytime stuff because they can. But mostly the Night Watch. The Night Watch consists of Vimes. Then we have the lovely Sergeant Colon and the Corporal Nobby Nobbs, who may or may not be human. This is the first book for all of them, basically. Corporal C.W. St. J. Nobbs. The Night Watch's motto is Fabricate Diem, PVNC, which means for the time being. So basically, the Night Watch, you have Captain Vimes, who he just is a pitiful Night Watch. There's the three of them faffing about. Basically, if there's a crime, they run away. They just try not to be near any crime. Only arrest people who are easy to arrest. The Day Watch isn't much better, but they don't really interact. Carrot Ironfinderson, who is a dwarf, a 6-foot-tall ginger dwarf with all the muscles, sends Carrot's letters are lovely. They're just like proper post home. I'm a bit too modern, sorry. He sends letters home, a proper post home, about his life in Ank Morpork, and bad spelling and all. It's lovely, and he loves his parents. He is also not a dwarf, although he is, because he's been adopted in, and all the way through there's this big cultural thing about people saying he's not a dwarf, but he's definitely a dwarf because he joins in with the dwarves, and people saying you're not a dwarf because you're 6 foot tall and you're actually human, and so on and so forth. So Carrot comes in, he's memorised all the rules, he's memorised everything, he's so friendly, he's just lovely. Then dragons happen. The lodge of the elucidated brethren of the Elbon Knight get together and they want to get rid of the patrician and bring in a king. Now, this king is not the best king in the world. They do some magic and a dragon appears and it takes fire to the city, basically. Meanwhile, Carrot is trying to change the Night Watch. At the moment, they just go around with their bells going 12 o'clock and all's well, 12 o'clock and all's well, as quiet as possible so no one tries to, mug them or anything. Whereas Carrot changes this and starts to actually stop criminals, and it gets a bit annoying to the rest of the crew. Vimes at this point is still a drunkard. Nobby Nobbs is still Nobby Nobbs, and Sergeant Colon is just Sergeant Colon. Still, never seeing his wife because they both sleep at different times. Brilliant marriage. The leader of this elucidated brethren manages to take control of the dragon and dispose the patrician, and the dragon takes charge, and he needs a virgin of noble birth as a sacrifice. And who will that be? Captain Vimes has been hanging out with a Lady Ramkin, who we all get to know and love later on. Lady Ramkin is reasonably aged. I think both of them are in their 50s. We're not talking about the Watch TV series at the moment because I'm still mildly annoyed that Ramkin seems reasonably younger than Vimes. So she's, say, in her 50s, probably a bit younger. I think she's meant to be in her 50s in this book, but then Pratchett realigns things later on because she does have a child in a few books hence, and if she's in her 50s, that is pretty old. So maybe she's meant to be 40 and then like 44 when she has a baby. Like that's possible. Not likely, but possible. So she's reasonably old. So they go to try and find a virgin of noble birth. And the only one is Sybil Ramkin. So of course Vimes gets all angry. This is one of those books that brings across the phrase 1,000,000 to 1 chances happen 9 times out of 10. And that's true. Personally, I believe that's true. If you kind of average out each of them. So you mean roughly 1,000,000 to 1 and roughly 9 out of 10. If you think about it, most things are 1,000,000 to 1 chance. The chance that I will stutter the next word is 1,000,000 to 1. No, it's probably not. It's probably more likely than that. Point is that 9 times out of 10 things you do are a 1,000,000 to 1 chance, because there's a million different things that could happen. And yes, there may be a few things that are slightly more likely to happen, but they're still reasonably unlikely. The likelihood that a car will go past in the next 2 seconds is quite unlikely, because I live on a quiet road. But when you see a car going past, you don't think, oh, that's a 1,000,000 to 1 chance. You just go, oh, car. Statistics, basically. We can argue about this if you want. Vimes is imprisoned with the patrician. They have a nice conversation. They're rescued by the librarian. And I always find this one funny because there's a whole thing around the fact that the door is locked from the inside, not the outside. Hilarious! I'm not going to lie, most of what I know about this one is from the audio play, which is very good. I'd say it's one of the most comprehensive of all of them. Sybil, I haven't mentioned yet, loves dragons. So the fact that she is the one that they pick as the noble virgin to be killed is ironic, because she pleads for it to save its life when the mob are trying to kill it. Carrot, on the other hand, is a bit of a babe and tries to arrest it. Another character I haven't mentioned yet is Errol. Errol the dragon. Errol the slightly, I don't know a PC way of saying this, just backward dragon. He's a bit special. And he falls in love with the king dragon. He's only a little swamp dragon, little tiny swamp dragon. Big, massive king dragon turns out to be a queen dragon. I don't think they turn out to be gay. I'm pretty sure it turns out to be a queen dragon. And they fall in love. So rather than Sybil pleading for its life, Carrot I don't know how you arrest a dragon, but he did it. Or the mob trying to kill it. Errol takes it away into the sunset, and they go off in love. It kind of makes me think of the end of Shrek, although this was obviously before Shrek, and Errol's not a donkey. The patrician comes back. By this point we know that the patrician is Vetinari. This is the first book where Vetinari is named as Vetinari, which is quite nice. It's nice to actually know who he is now. And that's the end. So let's start with Captain Carrot. Oh, well, Corporal Carrot. Constable Carrot, even. He's Constable Carrot in this one. Sorry, I have a short memory. So, Constable Carrot. One thing I only recently realised is that throughout the books we don't see from his point of view. The only time we see his actual inner monologue is through his letters. But that's still, he's thinking about what to put out there. And it kind of, I think it helps with his personality, because you still see him as this slow, dim-witted man, when actually, we don't know, he's just being who he is. Carrot really changes things. On his first day, he doesn't really understand how Ank Morpork works, and he arrests the chief of the Thieves Guild, which is a bit of a no-no. And it's for theft. Like, if he'd arrested him for something else, that's legitimate, because he's Thief Guild and he's only really allowed to do thieving. His Constable Carrot's dwarfish name, and I can't pronounce this, is Kazadblat. Kazblat, basically, translated, it means headbanger, because he's 6 foot tall and he keeps on banging his head. Detritus is also in this one, but he doesn't speak a word. He's just sort of mentioned in the background, which is quite sad, as he kind of is quite a big part of the City Watch later on. Then we have Corporal Nobby Nobbs. And to give him his full name, Cecil Wormsborough St John Nobbs. And he's always been a corporal. He gets promoted once and it doesn't go well. And he's actually smaller than most dwarves. He's also been probably 34 for many years. He's the son of Sconnor and Maisie Nobbs in Ank Morpork, and he was brought up in a cellar. It is said that he's either the youngest or only child of them, because no one could bring any more children into the world after seeing that in a crib. Which I think is pretty mean. It's pretty mean. Pratchett has a thing with walking, and Nobby is always sidling, and it just gives you that feel of, he's a bit of a knob. So now we're on to Fred Colon. Now Fred Colon, again, is just one of those guys who carries on throughout all the books. He and his wife have been happily married for many years, even though it's likely that they basically never meet each other, as he works during the night, she works during the day. There's maybe a small crossover period, but mostly they communicate via notes. The ex-infantryman in the Duke of Quirm's middleweight life infantry regiment. He was in the Pheasant Pluckers. I love a good tongue twister. I actually got that one on the first time, I will say. He's mildly illiterate. One thing that is really to like about Sergeant Colon is he doesn't take bribes. He's very honest, and you can see why he becomes part of the Modern Watch, because he's a good egg. He's a good egg, and along with Vimes, who's very, very righteous and truth-driven. And there's obviously Carrot as well. Nobby is just along for the ride. He causes little harm as well as the little good that he causes, and they all between them build up this new watch throughout the next few books. He is just a typecast sergeant, basically. He tries his goes at other ranks, but he's never very good at it. He always is this sort of eternal sergeant who's steadfast, does the job in front of him, basically. And now we're on to Blackboard Monitor Vimes. So Captain Vimes has been captain of the City Watch for a while now. Well, of the Night Watch. Pratchett never really describes what he looks like. I have tried to find descriptions and he doesn't, which is quite interesting because a lot of people do really think they know what he looks like. It made me a bit sad when I saw who they chose for the TV series, that they seemed to go for kind of the typecast look that everyone expected, and they didn't kind of go out the box. When if you're going to pick a female veterinary, do something weird with Vimes. But we'll see. So he starts off as this drunk policeman in the gutter, useless, just the job getting on top of him. And if you've read the books, you know exactly where he ends up. And there's a good sort of parallel between his sort of progress and the Watch's progress. Vimes was born in the Shades in Cockbull Street. His father is called Thomas Vimes, and he was educated at a dame's school, which comes in vaguely into the plot later on when it turns out he was the Blackboard Monitor. A dame's school was a traditional English thing where women were teaching rather than men, just sort of in a woman's home, basically. Usually a private school where you pay to go, but usually a bit cheaper because it's a woman doing the teaching, and you know, women are cheaper. He had to drop out of school to learn about how to live on the streets. His father was a watchman, and his father also was likely to have been a drunkard too. So there's this sort of family working class tradition that he then tries to break out of and make something different of himself, i.e. not drunk and a gutter policeman. In later books we get to hear more about Sam's history and where he came from, but I'll leave that until those books rather than sort of delving into it here. He, almost right away in Guard's Guard, starts dating Sybil Rankin, who is a lady who owns most of Ank Morpork. She is the leading expert in swamp dragons, which obviously helps the plot because the plot is very dragon based. She's very high class, but she's one of those proper, it's almost horsey women, you know, when you get the high class women who then go out at 5 a.m. to look after their horses. It's very much based on that sort of thing. It's very practical. We also talk about Vimes' shoe theory of economics, where if you're rich you can buy a really nice pair of shoes which lasts for years. If you're poor, you buy a shoe that's, I don't know, a tenth of the price but only lasts 1 year instead of 50 years. And obviously as soon as he becomes part of the upper class with Lady Sybil, things start to shift and he starts being able to buy the nicer boots. You can't actually see what I'm doing here, can you? I'm just gonna, there's a cat. I'm not just fiddling with myself, I promise. So I'm just gonna carry on sitting like this. Sybil is one of the few female characters in the Watch books, actually, until we get Angua and Cheery, whether or not you count Cheery as a woman until later. Because Sybil's so into dragons, she has very little of her natural hair left over, so she wears wigs most of the time because of her singed natural look. So, on Goodreads, this has a 4.33. I think that's the highest score so far of any Discworld books, and you do see the Samuel Vimes books getting the highest scores, because I think the highest scored Discworld book is Night Watch. People just love him. The City Watch books are generally from Vimes' point of view, and his point of view is just very... There's a lot of imposter syndrome there. There's a lot of feeling what's right and wrong and not quite getting yourself. And his character growth, there's a lot of character growth. And it's just quite nice to watch. Oh, sorry, I thought you were biting me. You're just licking me. This is one of the best books. I think this is my favourite book so far. I definitely think it's the best radio one if you want to go and listen to the radio stories. I'll see you next time. So the next one is Eric. Bye.